We might still have some people just join as we go along. But hi, everybody. Thanks very much for coming along to the science event this evening. We're going to speak about the Science Foundation Year course and a bit around the support you'll receive studying on a foundation year at the University of Leeds, extra things that are really good to know about. And then we're also joined by Dr. Katie Dobson, who's going to speak about the course itself and everything that you'll learn on it, and go through some bits and bobs, which is brilliant to hear. And also we're joined by Stephen and Emily, who were very kindly given up part of their evening to talk a bit about what it's like to be a student on the course as well. So yeah, the overview for the session really is going to be, you know, me kind of talking for a few minutes about the foundation years, a bit of information that's really good, general information to know, you know, about foundation years, what they are really as well, in case you're not that familiar, and our widening participation criteria. But I'll go into that in a moment. I'm going to then pass over to Katie. She's going to go through a bit of an overview of the course, progression routes, and a bit of a taster of what it's like to study in the programme. And then, as I said, we're going to hear from Stephen and Emily. But as we go along, please feel free to ask as many questions as you want. Honestly, the more questions we get, the better, because we're really here to answer anything that you want to know about the course or anything else that you come here wanting to know about. So feel free to ask as many questions as we go along. For anybody unfamiliar with Zoom, firstly, if you have any technical problems, if you can't hear us, if you know we're cutting in and out or anything like that, please let us know if you can. Greg is also very kindly here, and we'll chip in with bits and bobs, and he's also going to very kindly help with any technical issues that people may have. But he probably, you know, will say that first things first. If you are having any issues, often the best thing to do is just to log out and come back in, and often that can solve it. But you can talk to us through the chat function, which I think should be, if you look at the top ribbon, I think, at least it is on my computer, you'll be able to see the chat function. But feel free to switch your microphone on if you have any questions as well. We're really happy to answer any of them. So I will move on to a bit about the actual foundation years. But just to mention as well, you know, we're from the Lifelong Learning Centre at the University of Leeds. The Lifelong Learning Centre is a school within the university and has courses such as foundation years, and also courses that could be studied part-time by adults. And we also offer a lot of support as well. So I'll speak a bit about the support we offer at the Lifelong Learning Centre as we go along, but also at the end as well. But for anybody who's not familiar with what a foundation year is, you know, it's probably a good idea for me just to give you a little bit of an overview, really. So a foundation year essentially is for anybody who doesn't have, or maybe isn't predicted, the grades that you need for immediate entry onto a particular degree course. So in that instance, you know, a lot of people will take a foundation year, which is a preparatory year you do at university to really get you ready for studying the course that you want to go on to do after. It really does help you prepare for your degree level studies, really. It's studied within the university, and you know, you'll be the same as any other student, and I'm sure Stephen and Emily will speak a little bit about that as well. But it really gives you that opportunity in that time to develop your understanding of the particular subject area that you're going to be progressing on to after you finish your foundation year. And as a result, because it's a preparatory year, you know, the entry requirements are lower than they would be for progressing directly onto a degree course, onto year one of a degree course. And I'll speak a little bit about that in the next slide. And on, you know, successful completion of your first year of your foundation year, you'll then go on to the first year of your foundation, of your degree course. And, you know, people who study our science foundation year, our interdisciplinary science foundation year, really do go into a huge range of different programs, such as, you know, courses in engineering, healthcare, dentistry, maths, biological sciences, chemistry, biology, physics, food sciences, biomedical sciences. I mean, there really is too many to list. There's that many different routes that you can go on to. So it really is a course with a huge range of progression routes, you know, into different departments across the university. And, you know, who are foundation years for, I think, is another good question that often people, you know, want to ask, and it's understandable. But essentially foundation years are for anybody who feels they need that extra year, of studying to prepare them and support them for what they're going on to study after. So it really is a supportive environment to help you get the study skills you need and the knowledge you need to then progress to that next level, essentially. And as I mentioned, the entry requirements are going to be lower than if you were progressing directly onto a degree, let's say hypothetically in mechanical engineering or in dentistry or in biomedical science, for example. And for our interdisciplinary science foundation year course, a typical A-level offer is CDD. BTEC, it would be merit pass. So as you can see, quite a big difference if you've had a look on our website at entry requirements for the programs. Now, there are a number of different courses which are also accepted as well as these. So by no means is it a full list. The Access, for example, which is studied at college, but also a number of different courses will be accepted. And if you are an adult, maybe somebody who's been out of education for a while, often students can come through via our alternative entry scheme as well, where your life experience is often considered in lieu maybe of the entry requirements for different courses. So if that's, if that fits you, if you think that's your circumstances, please do get in contact with us at the Lifelong Learning Centre. I'll provide our email address in a minute and we can look into that further for you. But, that brings me quite nicely onto the next bullet point, really, because we do have a huge range of different students from different backgrounds, different ages, studying foundation years, not just the science foundation year, but all the different foundation years we have at the University of Leeds. We have students who have just finished perhaps sixth form or college, at 18 and are now going on to a university study, but we also have students maybe in their 20s, 30s, 40s and onwards. So it really is a wide mix of students. So yeah, it really is a wide mix of different people going on to a huge different range of programs. So I thought as well, just before I pass over to Katie, it's worth just talking a little bit about our entry requirements as well for our programs. So for our interdisciplinary science foundation year course, as well as meeting our entry requirements around GCSEs and your qualifications, we also have a widening participation criteria. And this widening participation criteria needs to be met as well as our entry requirements as well as our academic entry requirements, should I say. So you also need to meet one of the following. You either grew up in public care, your permanent address is in an area with low participation in higher education, that's your postcode, or in the year you took your GCSEs, your school pass rates were below the national average. So that's not your own qualifications, it's your school's qualifications or your school pass rates. Now, the one thing I would say is that, often this information is not maybe straight away, we don't know it straight away, and that's fine. And I would say if you're unsure at all, if you have any questions, please do get in contact with us. If you think you might be, but you're not quite sure if you meet any of these, don't rule yourself out and contact us at lifelonglearning@leeds.ac.uk and we can look into it a bit further for you. So just to let you know, and you can read about it a bit more on our website as well, but if you have any questions about this, feel free to let us know. And also just to mention as well, we do have another course, another science course that you might have seen on our website, and it's called BSC Studies in Science. This is another foundation year course, which runs alongside the Interdisciplinary Science foundation year. And it essentially works as a conversion course for anybody who wants to progress onto a degree in a scientific discipline, but maybe hasn't studied those qualifications, let's say hypothetically at A-level or whatever level 3 qualification you've studied if you've done one. So for example, you did humanities or arts-based A-levels. This would be a course where essentially it works as a conversion one, so you can go on to a number of different programs. It doesn't have a widening participation criteria, so that's previous slide isn't applicable to this particular course, but it does have slightly higher entry requirements as well. So have a look on our website, let us know in the chat if you have any questions about it today. And there are some courses it doesn't progress onto as well. So it's worth me saying just courses in healthcare and dentistry, it wouldn't progress onto, but Katie will sure, I'm sure, let me know if I've got that wrong. And finally, and then I'm going to pass over to Katie, just to let you know as well, because finance is a big thing for everybody, of course, and knowing about the finance I think is really important and how a foundation year could affect you. Well, you know, it's not going to affect you in any negative way, I guess, is the thing to know. Student finance considers a foundation year study at university as the normal duration of a course, normal duration of a degree course. So you can still get everything else that every other student is eligible for. So your maintenance loan, your tuition fee loans for the duration of your studies, including your foundation year, but also anything extra that you might be able to get. So any childcare or disability support, you know, you'd still get access to that. And actually at the university as well, we offer some bursaries, so money you don't have to pay back, and a fee discount as well that you might be able to be eligible for depending on your circumstances. And it could be up to £3,000 a year that you could get on top of everything else for studying at the university. So Greg will really kindly, I'm sure, put a link to a bit more information about the Leeds bursary. But if you have any questions, please do let me know. And that's it from me. I'm going to pass over to Katie. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and she's going to then share hers. Hopefully it works, fingers crossed. So I will stop sharing now.
Thanks, John. I was going to say now, let's have fun with this and let's see if I can manage to share mine, because this is a new one for me. Super. Is that working?
I can see it fine. That looks brilliant.
Lovely. Well, first of all, I want to say just thank you for you all being here. Hopefully I will give you a nice overview of what it is that we do. And then I'll move into a kind of a taster into basically why I love science. But specifically, I'll be honest, I'm a mathematician, so it's going to be maths-based, but hopefully in a fun kind of way, to give you an impression of, I suppose, what it's like to be with us, what we would be like as teachers, but also kind of what university's all about. So that's kind of where I'm going to go, but I'll start off with the foundation programme. So we are, in my opinion, and I'm biased, we are a wonderful general science foundation programme. What that means is we group all our students together at the beginning. So it's not like a subject specialist foundation year. So it's not like you would have a specific one for medicine or a specific one for maths or anything like that. Everyone's together because we find that there's a benefit in the interdisciplinary nature of the sciences, that it helps to get an understanding of what it is that everyone does. And so we start that off quite early because it's an ethos that the university believes in. But that being said, how our foundation year works is that we have pathways within it. So we group our students via the subject specialism that they're looking to move on towards. So for example, we have a kind of large biology or healthcare pathway. So students on that would study primarily biology as their main kind of core topic. And then alongside that, there'd be about it's about thirds. So a third biology, a third of it maths, and then a third of it other topics such as chemistry or kind of academic skills, nature of science, things that we find kind of embed that interdisciplinary nature and skills that we think are important for our students to progress on with. So that's one of our major pathways. Our second one is our kind of engineering or our physical science pathway. So that's for students that want to study things like engineering or the kind of core sciences, so like maths, chemistry, physics, or any of those. And those students would primarily, their core topic would be physics. So that's the major topic that they would need, and they'd study about a third of that, again a third of maths, and then a third of those other modules. And then our third main pathway is our earth sciences. So those are things like kind of environmental science, geology, meteorology, kind of anything that involves kind of earth and anything kind of studying around it. So the main kind of topic around that would be kind of a geological science background. And then again, a third of it being maths, a third of it other topics that we think are most suited. So our programme has lots of different modules and lots of different options that our students can take and choose from. And we kind of tailor it, if you like, to suit which pathway or which subject specialism it is that you want to do. So on the foundation year, it helps if our students have an idea of what it is they would like to do before they come onto the foundation year, just that we can help put the student on that right pathway, because it is a very specific pathway eventually that you will go on to. So we want to make sure we've got that kind of right from the early kind of the offset. With that in mind, though, what we have is, like I say, lots of different topics. So, for example, even within the maths, everyone doesn't do the same maths. The maths is very specific to the kind of degrees you would want to go on to. So, for example, our students on that biology pathway, they don't need kind of the same level of kind of physical maths, so things like maybe vectors or some of the kind of geometry areas, but they need more kind of analytical maths, so things like statistics. Likewise, our engineers need the opposite to that. So even our modules are tailored towards those pathways. So even though we might use an umbrella term like maths, the module titles and the modules that you would do are very kind of pathway specific. Even within the biology pathway, there are lots of biology based topics and choice within that. So for example, all our students that are on the biology pathway take our organisms module that kind of looks at kind of cell structure and things like that, of how organisms are formed and how they function in any kind of living organism. But then depending on your speciality, even within biology, you might want to be more plant focused compared to human focus. Or if you're interested, for example, in something like a medicine or nursing or something like that, something that is more kind of health based, human biology, that would make more sense. So even within a pathway, there are still some choices and some modules that would be more tailored and suited towards your progression, the degree you want to go on to. Likewise, for chemistry, we cover a broad range. So we go from industrial chemistry, which covers our more kind of engineering side, especially kind of chemical engineering. We have a biochemistry, which covers the kind of more biological, and also things like sustainability and how chemical processes are these days. You want to be using kind of chemical processes that are going to be safe for the environment. So we look at things like that. And then finally, if you're interested, obviously, in our engineering kind of pathway, the physics modules, even within that, we have different modules based on kind of what is most specific. So most students choose kind of both, but we kind of cover mechanics, waves, and things like that. And even some people on our biology pathway can choose physics and vice versa, but we kind of recommend certain pathways. I should also say, apologies if I talk quick. I do that when I'm nervous, so bear with me, but I'll gladly answer any questions. So I wanted to give a kind of idea of some of the degrees that we offer at the University of Leeds, because I think just using umbrella terms can kind of sometimes be too general. And so I've put up on the screen just some of them on our biology pathway, just to give you a variety of, these are degrees that students that have studied with us have gone on to take. So audiology, for example, is the study of hearing. So to be an audiologist, you would, thinking of people that work in places like even like do hearing tests at like Boots or other like opticians or things like that, those are audiologists. But likewise, thinking of in an NHS hospital setting, someone that looks at kind of hearing loss, they would be an audiologist. And you can see from the kind of gambit of biology-based degrees, they can cover things from kind of ecology and environmental-based topics, all the way through to things like psychology and zoology. So those are just a flavour and a taste of some of the degrees. And these kind of degrees you can lead on to jobs. For example, if you wanted to be involved in something like cancer research, that would be something like a biomedical science degree would work for you. We have had students that have been kind of immunologists, kind of animal welfare specialists. Some of our students, thinking of a former student, they travelled Australia when they were young, and they really became interested in cattle. And so actually they now work for, I think, is it still called DEFRA, the Department for Environment, Farming and, well, whatever DEFRA is now, but kind of they now advise on what is good kind of animal food and what is the best kind of nutritional food for large livestock, and they advise the government on things like that. And so the roles and jobs after these kind of degrees can be very varied. And so the degree itself is obviously really important, but the jobs can also be varied, and we can give advice on what kind of degree you might want to do, kind of, and what pathway would be best for you. Whoops, I've gone the wrong way. Thinking of engineering and physical sciences, again, I've given an overview. So we've got all kinds of different things in engineering, different kinds of maths. So for example, thinking of financial mathematics, an actuary is someone that works in insurance and kind of comes up with the modeling for insurance premiums and things like that, and studies kind of data on people and things like that. Aviation. Electrical engineering, material science. So there's, again, quite the range of things, even within an umbrella term of engineering or physical science. There's just so many different pathways that we go on to, and this is just a snapshot. So again, thinking of some professions that I know our students have gone on to. I've got a student that I've just actually joined up with on LinkedIn, the kind of networking site, and he currently works for Microsoft. So thinking of just studying computer science, and he's quite a high level programmer for Microsoft now. We have things, you know, kind of pilot kind of comes obvious from the aviation, but thinking of mechanical engineering, most people would think that that's about kind of building either machines, planes, cars, that kind of thing, but actually it's a role that people can use to get onto things like working with air traffic control, and so one of our former students works for air traffic control in Spain. So there are lots of different degrees, and there are lots of different professions that aren't necessarily obvious, and that's, like I say, one thing we can talk about. And finally, environmental science, that covered things like geography, geology, geophysics. So thinking of kind of earthquake studies, volcanoes, anything that the Earth, whenever the Earth does anything, the study of the Earth is often geophysics. But likewise, at the moment, right now, sustainability is a huge, important kind of area and topic that the world needs to kind of get a grip with, and so sustainability and environmental management looks at both the kind of policy side of the environment, but also understanding the kind of impacts kind of globally and locally. So thinking of those kind of degrees, students have gone on to work a lot for the government. So again, thinking of kind of some of those roles kind of from the council level. So a former student is currently working on the kind of implementation of electronic kind of the car chargers, the plug-in things, and rolling out that for Leeds and kind of city planning. So looking at transport and making sure that the air pollutants aren't too high. So looking at how traffic flow works, and that comes from an earth science based degree. So transport studies is something that you can also look at. So that's just a flavour of what we offer. So how does it actually work? So on the foundation year, how we work and how we teach, we like to prepare our students for what they will experience on the degree they go on to. So we teach in very similar methods. So we're somewhere in between potentially what you might have experienced before with either a school or a college, but we're also that step and kind of link to the degree afterwards. So we teach in things like lectures, seminars, workshops, and specifically because we're a science foundation year, we will definitely have physical labs. So for example, our lab facilities are in the schools that you would experience as an undergraduate. So if you wanted to go on to, for example, a biological science degree, the labs are actually in the School of Biological Science. Likewise, the chemistry labs are in chemistry, physics labs are in physics. So they're all using the kind of state-of-the-art lab facilities that we have here at the university. Our teaching, we hope, is very interactive. I'll hopefully let our wonderful students say whether we meet that or not. But we try and build in time where it's not just us talking, that hopefully everyone gets that chance to ask those questions and also get them answered. So we try and build in a lot of kind of supportive environments, as well as one-to-ones. So for every module that we have, we also have standalone, we call them office hours, but time where students can book one-to-ones with us. So we try to work in all the kind of methods and ways that you would experience on a degree. Likewise, often a question we have is, how do we assess? We assess in very similar ways again. We have modules that are 100% coursework, and we have modules that are kind of 80% exam. So we have a kind of range and kind of varying scenario based again on what it is that you can expect on the degrees you're going on to. So we have things like for maths especially, and physics, kind of problem sets. You know, here's a question, can you solve it? You know, and what is, you know, how would you go about that? We have things like lab reports, group work, videos, case studies, portfolios. All these things are kind of assessment methods that you would experience on the degree. So hopefully by doing them with us, you'll actually be better prepared and know what to expect when you do them kind of the year after. So all of it is indicative of what you can experience, hopefully, on the degree programme. Linked with that, you also have access to everything at the university. So as part of the university offer, everyone gets access to the Office 365, so the Microsoft software. We show how to use those, and we support our students in using those. So kind of from the first welcome week that we have in our kind of September, we kind of get into one of the computer clusters and start, you know, testing these systems out so that every student has access to that. So we already kind of plan in our kind of training on the systems early. So we don't expect any kind of digital understanding whatsoever. We support our students with that. The university has what we call computer clusters, which is just rooms of computers throughout the whole of the university campus, and you have access to those. And there's even some in our building that any student can use at any point. On top of that, as part of the Science Foundation, you're thinking of the software that we use that's very specific. We like software that supports our teaching, and we believe a lot in having software where you can try things before you physically do. So for example, we have a lab simulation software that lets you practice doing the lab before you physically go in there. Likewise, it could talk through kind of health and safety or anything like that. And we also have math support, because we know that maths sometimes can be a dreaded topic. So we have some software that is specifically for our students to support them with that and give them access to that. I'm going to pause. I realise I've been talking a lot. I can see that there's a lot in the chat. Apologies, I will definitely come to any questions. Definitely, I will breathe and I will ask them, I promise, in a minute. So let me just come back to, why is my screen now not moving? So what do we offer on the Science Foundation year? This is the best bit, I suppose. We are a dedicated team within the Lifelong Learning Centre. So we are a smaller unit within the university, but we are all experienced staff within the university. So for example, I have worked in other schools in the university and have that experience of knowing those progression areas. Likewise, the whole team does. So you've got dedicated staff. So you get that potentially more personal experience. As part of our foundation year and at the University of Leeds, every student is assigned a personal tutor. That's a member of staff you can go to for academic advice, kind of pastoral care if you've got any concerns, if you want to talk to someone. And as standard, we offer kind of one-to-one sessions at points throughout the year to make sure you're all right. So we've got regular check-in points, but we also kind of group our students via those kind of degrees you want to go on to, so you can make those friendship groups, because we know that that community feeling is really important as well when you go on to the degree. So if you make those kind of with us, they're people then that you're going to go on to the degree with that you already know, so you don't have to do that kind of, again, you already know people and are there. Within the Lifelong Learning Centre, we also replicate a lot of services that are available to the wider university. We duplicate actually and have them specific for our students. So thinking of academic skills, maths support, again, because we know it's an issue. We have a guidance team, which I know John's going to talk a little bit about later. We have a wonderful student experience team that they create, for example, like student newsletters to remind students of what kind of events are coming up. So they organise loads of different events, again, training, kind of support in lots of different ways. So there is a lot on offer, as well as just our dedicated team. There's a lot within the Lifelong Learning Centre that kind of supports the year that you would be with us. Super. So I'm going to pause now just to see if there's any questions before I kind of go into a taster of what it's like to kind of learn and be a student at the University of Leeds, just to see if there's any quick questions that you want me to kind of cover first. Now, I've forgotten how to get my chat back up. Oh, there's where the chat went. Were there any questions you needed me to cover?
Katie, I think Nathan has his hand up. I think perhaps has a question.
Lovely, Nathan. Hi, Nathan.
Hello. Why is chemistry a compulsory module?
It's a great question. It's a question a lot of people ask. That's a great question. So the reason is because depending on which route our students want to go on to, it helps to have an understanding. Now, you won't necessarily do a lot of chemistry. It depends on the degree you're going to go on to do. But we find that it helps. So for example, to be a kind of electrical engineer, it helps to know kind of what things are made of, kind of, again, that material side. You're going to want to know if it's going to melt or not. I'm being quite simplistic, obviously, but just knowing what things are made of and how they will react can be quite important from a manufacturing point of view at one kind of side and the engineering. But for the biology side especially, it's much more kind of linked. So kind of the atomic structure and the kind of physical structure of anything is more chemistry based. But we find that having a broader understanding of a few sciences is more beneficial to our students when they go on, because they can see the links that oftentimes students that don't have the chemistry can't see. So it's in theory just to get our students ahead, but it will be based around the degree that you'd want to kind of go on to. So it's it helps to understand. Out of curiosity, sorry to put you on the spot, is there kind of a pathway that you might be thinking about?
Computer science.
Computer science, bless. That is one of my specialties. But I can completely understand now why you've asked that question. That is probably the one where I would say slightly less. But having said that, the School of Computing at the University of Leeds does a lot of research and simulation around healthcare, funnily enough. And so that they look at kind of the programming, and also whether you can kind of AI, if you like, diagnosis. And so having an understanding of what it is that the AI is trying to learn from, again, having that kind of chemical, biological understanding can help. Obviously, that would be much further on into your degree in computer science, but again, having that basic understanding can help later on, depending on which avenue you're going on to. But yeah, thinking of the AI kind of route, it can have a little bit, but I can see that it's slightly less for computer science.
Yeah. The other thing was, I guess on computer science, I'll be doing physics. But the other thing is, I was going to ask, are you going to go over the discovery modules?
That is a great question. So with the foundation year, we are a very specific year that is and does cover a lot of topics. So while you're with us for that year, you wouldn't be doing any discovery modules, but after the foundation year, you would be eligible to do all discovery modules as you would on the degree. So discovery modules would be a thing once you're on the degree itself. So you wouldn't do them with us. You're right, for computer science specifically, you would be studying, the majority actually would be, and your largest portion of your year would be maths. Then you would have a proportion of physics, and then lesser the chemistry and the academic kind of skills and nature of science kind of things. So yes, it would be less so, but unfortunately discovery modules, because we have quite a full year, you can't have those with us, but you would once you've progressed on.
It's probably better off that way anyway. I was just curious.
No, and it's good. And actually, that's one of the things that we would talk about. So when you're assigned your personal tutor, one of the things that we hope is that personal tutor is normally someone that is subject specialist. So I hate to say this to you, but probably you'd end up with me as a personal tutor, because I know computer science the best. So, I hope that doesn't put you off.
He's a mathematician and computer science. I think it's perfect.
It is. Those are my two specialisms. So yes, So we would actually, again, once we get towards the end of the foundation year, we start having those conversations about, kind of thinking about what modules you're going to be doing next year. Do we have any advice on which we think you'd be best taking? If there are any discovery modules, if you have any optional choices, because even on the degrees themselves, you have kind of like some, again, core bits that you have to take and then some choice. And so we can talk through that because we've got experience of those degrees as well. So we can kind of know, because we'll know you by that point, knowing what your likes and dislikes are, strengths and weaknesses, we can help advise that way to think through even kind of year one and onwards.
All right, thank you.
More than welcome. More than welcome.
Katie, we also had another question around in the chat about how many hours per week would we be in lectures for? And I think it was for the engineering pathway, I think.
It's a great question. Our timetable, and I'm going to say, and I can now see that, thanks. Yeah, I'm going to say Stephen and Emily are loving the answers from them. Yeah, we try not to start any earlier than 9 and certainly no later than 5. We're not full days every day, but you might have bits, you might have gaps in it. So roughly, I would say it's about 20 contact hours. So that's where you've got teaching, that covers labs, all the things that you have to kind of be at, the compulsory bits. It's about 20 hours. Some days are fuller than others. So we try. Yeah, Mondays currently with the timetable is the heaviest day, where it's about 6 hours of class. Obviously, you'll always get a lunch break as best we can. We always try and make sure there's an hour for lunch. Some days, currently this year, the timetable, our students have kind of one free kind of morning a week and one free afternoon, because we know that some of our students like a part-time job. So we try and sort the timetable so that it's flexible enough so that there are options there for students, but it depends on kind of which modules you're doing. They can end up better than others. And yeah, depending on those modules in the second semester, so after our Christmas bit, when the modules get much more specific, those timetables can be very personalized, and there can be a few more gaps in them where you might even work a day where you don't have anything, so you can catch up. What we try to do is the one-to-one support that we offer. We always try and put those on days when obviously you're free, and put them at times that will hopefully be best suited for when you've got free time. So for example, on those days where you might have a free morning, we try and put kind of one-to-one based stuff then. Those were great questions. I will also say in advance apologies. We don't know the timetable until the September that you begin with us. So we submit it to the university, but we don't know it until the September. So we don't know if we get what we asked for because it's based on rooms. So I can give you a rough idea, but that's why I'm being vague. So apologies for that. Okay. Right then, now comes the fun bit of now you're going to get a little mini brief taster into why I love maths. So why science, why maths, but specifically, yeah, just why. Why is a question that I think every scientist should have. It was certainly the question that annoyed my parents the most and most of my teachers, because I would always ask it, but why? Why does it do that? And I think that's the kind of essence of why we do degrees, is to kind of try and find some of those answers and try and find some of those solutions. So why do I love maths and why do I love science? That's hopefully what I'm going to share with us now, if I can get this to move. So I'm going to say, here's a question for everyone in the chat. Do you have a favorite number, or do you just want to pick a number? And hopefully I'm going to try right on the screen. Does anyone have a favorite? Oh, bless you, Emily, for picking pi. Bless you, I will love you forever for doing that. So thinking of my number line, if I can get it to draw, if we think of 1, oops, if I can, come on, pen, let me write in black. So if 1's about there, apologies, I'm using a tablet, 2's about there, 3's about there. So pi, I'm going to put my pi about there. So does anyone else have a favorite number? Yeah, 3 point something something. Yeah, you can tell. I might be a mathematician, but I can also be a bit vague. Does anyone else have a favorite number? Someone must have one. comments in the chat. 0, oh, loving it. Oh, we've got a 6 and a 7. Right, so we've got. I'm going to run out of screen. We've got thinking. We've got all the way up. So I'm going to say I'm going to wrap. So 5, 6, 7 are going to be that way. Thank you for picking 0, Nathan. That's my favourite as well. Yeah, 0 is definitely mine. The one fun fact I loved, and I think the reason I pick it is because 0 has wonderful properties. It's an even number, but it's neither positive nor negative. It's kind of somewhere in limbo. It's a little bit mysterious, so I like 0. But why I love numbers and why I love maths, if everyone in the world picked a different number, we'd still have an infinite amount of them left over. So if everyone in the world picked their favourite number, there'd be an infinite amount left that somebody else could pick and somebody else could choose from. And if you notice, most people pick positive numbers. I'm going to say I'm loving Emily for picking pi, but we could have just as easily kind of picked then kind of negative numbers. We could have picked -1, could have picked -2. So if everyone in the world picked a number, there'd still be an infinite amount left over. But then, can anyone think of any numbers between 0 and 1? Because you don't have to pick whole numbers, do you? You could have picked a number that was between 0 and 1. So are there any numbers between 0 and 1 that you know of? Yeah, you can pick halves. Yeah. So thinking of that, we can pick nicely in the middle. So we've got half in there. So even in this little area, I can also do it as a decimal. So she can do it as a decimal. So even in this little area, we can all pick a number. So for example, I could pick like 0.00000 like 7. Thinking of who, I can't remember, but someone picked 7 as their favourite number. We could have a load of noughts and then a 7. That's in that little teeny tiny gap between 0 and 1. And if everyone in the world picked a number between 0 and 1, there'd still be an infinite amount left over. So physically, we have given that amount of space, but within that teeny tiny physical approximation of that, there are an infinite amount of numbers in that between 0 and 1, an infinite amount of numbers. So just in that little bit there is an infinite amount. And so therefore, if we think of the whole number line, that is an infinite collection of infinite things. And so what really blew my mind when I was starting to learn maths is what I didn't know is because I thought of infinity as just this really big number. But infinity as a concept is also not unique. There are different kinds of infinity. And that as a concept blew my mind. So there are bigger versions of infinity. And it's like, well, if infinity is supposed to be like kind of the endpoints, what can be bigger than that? And there are bigger infinities. And so a maths degree, for example, looks at these different kinds of infinity and what kind of objects have these different kinds of infinite structures. But here's the mind bender is we can't see that because we put a number line to it, because we visually represented these things as measurements, because that's how our ancestors learned numbers, was through measurements, through money, through counting. But that's our impression of the numbers. But technically, these are infinite collections. And so that's what piqued my interest in maths. But within this, there are loads of different kinds of numbers. So I mentioned a couple. I mentioned positive and negative. So we have ways of categorizing these things. So we've got whole numbers, positive numbers, negatives. We have ones that we call integers. Well, integers are collections of positive whole numbers and positive negative numbers. We have naturals, we have things that are prime. So if you've ever heard that word before, it's things that can only be divided evenly or equally by itself and the number 1. We have fractions, decimals. One of the things even on the foundation year you learn is that there are all these different kinds of numbers and there are ways of grouping them. And what is really cool is that how we group them, they have certain properties. And that gets mimicked in life. So how we group certain numbers actually can be seen in how chemicals and their atomic structure and how we build up chemicals, how they work. and how they are formed. And that depends on numbers. And there are relationships between that. And so just these names that we give them, these groupings, they all have properties that are special. And that's why I love numbers. So I talked about some of them. So on the foundation year, if you're looking at the engineering pathway, for example, we won't just consider real numbers. We'll consider things that are called complex numbers. Mathematicians are great. They couldn't solve everything, so they made up some numbers. And those are called complex numbers. I'm being quite flippant, I do realise. But yes, mathematicians weren't happy enough with the numbers they got. They invented some more. And so even on the foundation year, we look at these complex numbers. And so we will look at these groupings of numbers and why they are important based on the kind of degrees you're looking to go on to. So I thought I'd pick just one number to show, even if I just picked one random number, why it's cool. So I picked a lesser known, what we call irrational number. So an irrational number is a number that you can't represent as a fraction. It has a decimal that's never ending. So just like pi, that has that kind of decimal pattern that doesn't repeat and doesn't end. The golden ratio, or phi, the Greek letter phi, is 1.618, and it goes on forever. Roughly speaking, as a number, if we were to represent it, it's 1 plus the square root of 5, all divided by 2. If you stick that in a calculator, it gives you the approximation. And phi is a wonderful number. Pi, the circle bit, is well known about, but phi is slightly less. So I thought I'd try and big up why I love phi. So why do I love it? It has links to something called the Fibonacci sequence, which is where you add previous numbers together. So if you start off with the number 1 and you add the previous, so the previous number was 0, you get the number 1. So 1 plus 1 gives you 2, 1 plus 2 gives you 3. So if you keep adding successive terms, you get this sequence. And eventually, if you divide those 2 consecutive terms, what you end up with is the golden ratio phi. So for example, if I take 34 and I divide it by 21, I get an approximation for this number, this phi. And each sequence, each pair, the further on this Fibonacci sequence you get, you approximate this number even better. And visually, how we see it is if we took squares where the lengths of the squares were each of those numbers and we kept going out and out, you end up with this spiral pattern. And what you see is this spiral pattern happens a lot in nature. And so, for example, both the Fibonacci sequence and phi can be seen in a lot of plants. The most obvious one is sunflowers. So if you notice, you end up with that spiral pattern in the seeds. But also, if you actually counted the seeds following out that spiral, you would get a Fibonacci sequence number. And likewise, whichever direction you pick, you will get a Fibonacci number. So if you take a left spiral and then a right spiral, divide them, you get phi. So it's called a golden angle, that kind of rotational part. But there are lots of other plants like this. So out of curiosity, roses, so how rose petals work, that's the same. Acorns, some trees do it, but lesser so. But this number just naturally appears in nature. So there are other plants like this. So feel free to go out when it's probably light again. Go out in your gardens, find any outdoor space. You will see this kind of property, this number, occur in the world around you, but you never knew it existed. Likewise, you remember that spiral pattern? That spiral pattern matches natural phenomenon. So for example, hurricanes or tropical storms, if you like, any kind of tropical storm. So typhoons. The difference between typhoon and hurricane is just the direction of the wind. So it's, I've shown a picture of a hurricane. And I said, you know, have you seen this pattern before? If anyone's ever seen a picture of the galaxy, it's that same spiral. So if anyone's seen a picture of the Milky Way, so our planets, our solar system has this pattern in it. And it's a number most people have never heard of, but it's all around us. The ancient Greeks actually did know about the number and they thought it was wonderful. So a lot of their kind of olden kind of architecture involves it. So again, thinking of those squares and those rectangles. So for example, the most famous example is the Parthenon. The NATO building is also built using that. But what also happens in engineering is looking at kind of load-bearing beams and the stress that is put on those, the amount of stress and the kind of lengths of those beams for optimal support. The proportions needed for that is the golden ratio. So the kind of optimum kind of stress-strain relationship in engineering ends up mimicking this wonderful number. It's also in all of us. So the measurements and the relationship between the lengths of your bones, even in just your finger, will give you the Fibonacci sequence. So if you take the length of the tip of your finger, that has one proportional length, then the next bone, then the next bone, they end up matching as a proportion that the Fibonacci sequence. And likewise, the distance between kind of your eyes, your ears and your chin, those end up following that kind of proportional pattern as well. So this number is everywhere and we just didn't know it. So hopefully that's the kind of why science, why I love it. What we aim to do on the foundation year is start you off on that journey. But what hopefully your degree will do is look to give you tools, look to give you methods that you can use so that you can ask and answer the world's kind of next questions of why. And so that's what we hope to start. And I realize there are lots of hands up and questions, so I will come to those questions now. You do see it a lot in fossils, and I love the Fibonacci sequence. Yeah, it's a great, you do see it a lot in fossils. So thinking of our lovely biology students, they were getting to see some of the fossil samples that we've got, and we've got that lovely spiral pattern. So yes, you see it in fossils. Elephants' trunks. If you ever see an elephant's trunk kind of rolled up, an elephant's trunk has these kind of like ridges on it. And so an elephant's trunk will also do the same. So yeah. Yes, you have also, yeah, it's everywhere. But that's the thing of, has anyone actually heard of either the golden ratio? Most people have heard maybe of the Fibonacci, but the actual golden ratio or phi, the Greek letter that we use to represent it, not many people have heard of that, especially compared to something like pi that is in the kind of circumference of a circle. Most people have heard of that one from a very young age, but phi, not so much. So that's why I wanted to kind of big it up and say, numbers are awesome.
Katie, I think we had a hand up.
I thought we did.
Yeah, from Andrew, I think it was. I don't know if you've still got a question, Andrew.
It was mainly around the like complex numbers and things like that. So would we go into context of things like imaginary numbers and like roots of negative numbers and things like that?
We would. I was going to say, as hopefully Emily can attest to, yes, we covered complex numbers for the group that I'm currently teaching. We covered that probably about a week ago now. So yes, we do look at imaginary numbers, and yes, we look at all of that. So that's the thing of, we don't replicate A levels. We teach the things that can sometimes overlap with them, but we teach the topics that we think are most relevant. So complex numbers isn't on the A-level maths syllabus, it's in the further maths A-level syllabus. In some areas of maths, we actually go beyond even the A-level, both A-level syllabuses, because it's the bits that we think will help you most for the degree you're going on to. So yes, we cherry pick the topics that we think are most relevant, and complex numbers is one that we think for our engineers. So yes, we definitely cover it. It's one of my favorites as well.
Brilliant, thank you.
You're more than welcome, because I just love them anyway, because I think that, yeah, people think badly of them because of the name complex, but they're really, really not. They're really some of the nicest numbers ever. So yeah, I wish we could rename them.
I think we've got some other questions in the chat if you want me to read them out,
I'll come back to the chat.
We've had some really good questions that, well, I've got no answer to them, so, but I'm sure you all have. So we've had one from F8 saying, can you give an example of a bigger infinity?
Yes. So I talked a lot about the kind of the whole numbers, so I'm gonna pick this screen to write on because it'll help hopefully help out. So hopefully, oops, if it'll let me. Oh, go back. There we go. So I talked about those whole numbers. So if we just look at those group of whole numbers, either positive or negative, those are what we call countably infinite. Oh, it's not behaving as this countable infinite. So that is one kind of, oh, I can't spell either. It would help if I could spell. Those are what we call a group of countably infinite numbers, because they are like the counting numbers. The bits in between, so looking at that snapshot of between 0 and 1, that group in there, that is what we call uncountably, because you can't order them in a nice way. You can't assign like that one's the first number, that one's the second. So that gap of all those decimals between 0 and 1, so just that kind of area in between 0 and 1, in there is what we call uncountably. And so that's a bigger class of infinite. So we group them by size. So it's a collection of numbers that has a bigger proportion. So just looking at the countably infinite, they're a smaller amount than the uncountably infinite. And you know that maths gets great. When we get through all the Greek letters, we turn to Hebrew. And so we classify them using Hebrew letters. So we often use Aleph. So there's one's called, the size is called Aleph 0, and one's Aleph 1. So yes, we can classify them, and it's even within that visual of the number line, it's the groups within that. I hope that kind of helped. Let me pop my chat back up.
There was another one that we had from Nathan about, does signed and unsigned apply to only program, or is it ever seen in the real world?
Great question. So oftentimes when we, so there are different number systems. So where we were looking at there was the decimal number system, where we count in like tens. So especially a lot in programming, but in other areas, it's easier to count in different number systems. So specifically binary. So computers work on a binary system. And within that, it's because you only have a 1 and a 0, it's harder to code that information. So we use signed and unsigned as a way to help us, again, assign the decimal number to the binary. So it's mainly, I would say, used from a programming perspective, but as a principle, mathematicians love it too, because we look at how we're encoding the information, and it's all about mappings of numbers. So you're mapping one set of numbers to a different set of numbers. So it's mainly seen from the practical use, which is programming, but people that study it tend to be kind of your pure mathematicians that are curious to see if there are links with any other topic. So yeah, crazy people like me that love stuff like that. Yes, base 2. Yes, so binary is what we would call a base 2. The decimal system is what we would call base 10. Technically, you could pick any base you wanted, but we tend to stick to either base 10 or things around 2. So yeah, 2, 4, 8, and 16 tend to be the other popular bases, but primarily that. But yes, you and I can definitely chat if you're interested in computer science. You and I can definitely chat about binary and all that kind of fun stuff.
We had a few questions, Katie, as well, about progression routes and stuff like that, if that's okay, before we did the number exercise. So Keely's asked, what route would you advise for nursing and midwifery?
Super. So nursing and midwifery would definitely be our biology pathway. So we'd recommend modules that would be more kind of the human biology side. I mean, obviously, if you want to study the more plant side, again, you can definitely do both. But we'd probably recommend modules that would be more kind of the human side. So you'd be studying the maths with the kind of biology based students. You'd be definitely doing organisms, and then we would look at the our applied biology module, which is more human focused. And then the chemistry would probably be looking at something like the biochemistry would be best suited for that. So again, within that, you'd still have some choice, but we'd probably recommend those modules best. And unless you really, really wanted to, we'd probably be saying no physics, unless you were really, really keen. But we'd probably just stick with that. So anything nursing, midwifery would be definitely our biology pathway, and within that I'd probably recommend a focus more on the human biology side.
And Katie, we had another question around the biology side, I think. Nalidi asked, on the biology pathway, could I use my nursing training as an access qualification?
Oh, that's a great question. In all honesty, I don't know, but that's the thing of we can check. The thing is that even if, as John was saying, even if you don't have the exact right qualifications, we do try and take in life experience, other qualifications you might have as a basis. So we will definitely look into that for you and see. Our admissions guru knows more specifically about which qualifications we can and we can't, but we'll definitely ask the team.
I will put the email address in the chat for the Lifelong Learning Centre. So Nalidi, if please feel free to get in contact with us if you've got any questions about that. And there was one more question as well that's just come in, Katie, from Ahmed. My question is regarding the progression onto dentistry with completion of the foundation year. Is a place reserved, or is it an interview guaranteed in addition to completing the admissions test BMAT?
Great question. So for dentistry, that's a very specific admissions process. So when you apply to us, you would do our kind of admissions process, and there would be a small interview as part of that with the School of Dentistry alongside us, but it wouldn't be the kind of full dentistry interview, is what you're saying. As part of being accepted onto the course, you are guaranteed, you're right, that dentistry interview. It is not a guaranteed place, though. It's guaranteed on you passing that interview to the kind of pass mark of the year. The BMAT is optional. We would always recommend the BMAT is done, but again, you can do that while you're on course. We wouldn't expect it of you in advance of doing the foundation year, because we don't expect anyone has that kind of subject understanding yet necessarily. So we could support you with that if you wanted to do it while you're on course, but it wouldn't be an expectation that you do it. It is definitely choice. So we guarantee an interview with the School of Dentistry, but unfortunately it isn't necessarily a guaranteed reserved place, if that makes sense.
We've had a couple more, if that's okay, Katie, and then we'll move on to hear from Stephen and Emily. So we just had a question. Sorry, I've lost them now. So Keely's asked, she works full time. Would this not be advisable, I'm assuming, alongside the studies?
We're quite an intensive year, so I would say that part-time would be best. We say probably no more than 10 hours a week, so no full-time. There is an expectation that kind of you'll be on campus with us in class, so it's just a bit too much, I would say, because we're actually more concerned about your well-being, trying to juggle both that, because a lot of our students do find that this in itself feels very much like a full-time job, because as well as the kind of main contact time, there's then kind of reading around and, like I say, prepping for some of those assessments. So that's not to say you can't have a job, but we would probably say looking at about a maximum of 10 hours a week is what we've seen students manage with before.
Brilliant. Thanks, Katie. Sorry, just a couple more on that, and then we'll hear from the students. And then if we've got any questions left, I'm sure Katie will happily answer them, or Stephen or Emily. We've had a question from Sonam about the healthcare pathway. What are the entry requirements for the healthcare pathway? I'm going to guess that it's dependent on what course you want to progress onto, but obviously I'll pass over to you, Katie.
It is. This is where I'm going to be really vague and really annoying. I apologise in advance. Each specific degree you would want to do is very specific. So, for example, medicine is different to nursing. Even nursing is different to midwifery. They just have slight differences. So they tend to be around the GCSEs. It's not actually about those kind of A levels or what we call the level 3. It tends to be around the GCSEs. That being said, if you don't have them, still talk to us. Don't rule yourself out of anything. Be talking to us because it might be that we can look at alternative entry kind of schemes, again, taking that life experience into account. But each one is a little bit different. It tends to be for the I'm going to use the umbrella of our health-based ones. They tend to be with the GCSEs what is equivalent to either a C or a kind of 4 or a 5. Tends to be the kind of grade boundary they're looking at for most of them, but each one is slightly different. So that's why I'm going to say, please feel free, get in touch with us. The information will definitely be on the website, but we can definitely clarify which one it is and what we can accept as alternatives and things like that. So yeah, please don't rule yourself out.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, do get in contact with us if there's any questions around entry requirements. We can certainly look into it for you. And I think sometimes, yeah, it's best if you get in contact after this, and we can advise further. It can be colleagues from our SES team who can probably have that conversation with you. There's one final question, and then we're going to move on to Stephen and Emily. So I'm just conscious of the time, so apologies. But there's been some amazing questions, by the way, some brilliant questions. Thanks so much, everybody. But FH has asked, with 20 hours contact time per week, approximately how many hours study are we required to do?
It's going to vary for each week. So some weeks you might not have as much to do thinking of your assessments and preparation for those. Some weeks it might be more. One of the things that, again, we can do is we can kind of sit down and help kind of plan out a timetable so that you can kind of try to keep it more even. But I would say that, again, because the days aren't full, some of that, some students like to, for example, come onto campus at kind of the 9 a.m, regardless of whether they've got a class or not, and to use that as time to be doing some of those things like doing assessments or other reading and study around that. So I would say that thinking of it like a kind of full-time job kind of sees you right, so that then you're not having to eat into kind of your evening kind of social time and things like that. I certainly wouldn't want anyone working kind of all evening and all weekend or anything like that. Again, I probably Stephen and Emily might probably best ask what it's actually like rather than what we intend it to be like. But we're always mindful of, we try to keep it as balanced as we can, but we do know that some weeks will be busier than others. But yeah, hopefully the timetable is decent enough to help plan it during a time that suits each individual. Sorry, I'm being vague again, aren't I? But yeah, roughly about a full-time job. So I'd say about 30 hours a week.
Thanks, Katie.
Including your teaching.
Thanks everybody for the questions as well. There's been some really brilliant questions. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Thanks, Katie, so much for going through the progression routes, the course, and also that taster. I really enjoyed it, I've got to say. I thought it was brilliant. So thank you so much. And, you know, we might run a little bit over, so apologies to anybody who's got to go at 1:15, but we've got Stephen and Emily with us, who have really kindly given up their time to let you know a little bit about what it's like to be a student on the course as well. So I don't know which of you would prefer to start. I'm going to pick on Emily, if that's okay. Or
that's fine by me.
Okay? Just because on the screen you're the closest to the start. That's all.
That's fine by me.
So Emily, you are a first year student, so you're on your foundation year at the moment and you're on the physics pathway, is that right?
I am, yes.
And I will pass over to you if that's okay.
So I might be a bit vague, so feel free to ask me questions because I don't really know exactly what I'm supposed to be talking about. But I found that the foundation year, because I did biology, chemistry and physics for A-level, I didn't have the maths to sort of go along with my like progression. So I found that the foundation year actually provided a lot of the stuff that I needed to be able to get onto my course. But as well as that, like it builds up on stuff that like you'll be taught at A-level. So like there might be stuff that is on this like syllabus and stuff that isn't. So that I guess I'd sort of advise that like if you notice there are like topics on the A-level syllabus, to sort of have a look and see if you can like I don't know what how I'm trying to word this, but like if you have a look around and you'll find a lot in like A-level textbooks or like online, there's a lot of resources for like more A-level based stuff. I don't really know what I'm supposed to say here, to be fair.
Well, no, it's brilliant to hear your experiences, Emily. I mean, how have you found the support in the first year? Do you think it's preparing you for what you're going to be going on to study next?
Yeah, there's like a lot of support, especially for the maths. Like Katie's my maths lecturer, and like anytime you ask her a question, she's so like willing to help. And it's the same for everybody. Like even if you think what you're going to ask is a really stupid basic question, like there's no such thing as a stupid question, and they're always willing to like provide the support that you need for that. Even if you think, oh, I should know this, everyone's going to think I'm silly for it. It's like not the case at all, because they'd rather you understood it than be stuck and not have a clue what you're doing.
Yeah, no, that sounds brilliant. I totally agree with you. I think you're right. There's no silly questions, is there? You're there to learn, and the tutors, want to help you with that. What about how have you found it being a student on campus on the foundation year? How's that been in your first year?
I found it, we're in a few different buildings to start. Like I remember our first ever session in induction week, it was on the other side of campus. So trying to find a few of the places was a bit odd, but they do provide a lot of like resources for like if you are starting off. So like they'll give you a map, they'll give you like a timetable, they'll help you find the buildings if you're not sure of where they are. And like they also are a lot understanding if you walk in a bit late because you've got no idea where you're going. So I think navigating campus is a lot easier than what it seems when you first get there, because you think, oh my goodness, it's such a big campus, where am I going? But there's like lots of maps everywhere, there's apps on the phone. Like we've got an app called Minerva, and it's got a timetable on it, and if you go onto the timetable section, you can actually like Google Maps or Apple Map like the actual building you're supposed to be on, so it's like very accessible to different people. I think you're on mute.
oh, I did it. I nearly got through a full session without actually talking when I was on mute.
To the best of
nearly
us.
did it. No, but that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Emily. I think as well, just to kind of reiterate what you were saying, when you're studying the foundation year at the university, you're exactly the same as every other student on campus. You get access to everything that everybody else gets access to. So whether that's the library, whether that's things at the student union or societies, everything you will get access to in exactly the same way as if you were a student on a first year of a degree program. And also, to be honest with you, more really, because you also get all the support from Katie and the course team, but also within the Lifelong Learning Centre, there's the skills team who are there to support you as well. And also there's support from our student support officer, Paul. And if you have any questions, any issues, sometimes it can be around the finances that people want a bit more information about, or there's lots of support that you can get access to. And we actually have a physical space in the Lifelong Learning Centre as well that a lot of students really enjoy studying in. So if anything, there's more that you can get access to, and more that you can benefit from. But thank you so much, Emily. It's lovely to hear that. Am I okay to pass over to you, Stephen? Unless I've kind of like cut you off, Emily, please tell me.
I only have one other sort of thing to say, is like there's a lot of different ways that you submit coursework and stuff, and like the amount of coursework you get differs. Like we've got a couple of weeks off for Easter. So we've noticed there's been more of an influx in coursework as we get towards the end of March. Whereas in like the exam sort of period, there's hardly any. And especially at the start of the year, you get very little amounts of coursework. But also you get different things to do the coursework on. So there's, for maths, there's a thing called numbers. And that's really good because you can keep redoing the coursework until you get 100% basically. And grade scope, which is where you handwrite your answers, you take photos of it, you submit it as a PDF, but you can keep submitting until the deadline. So it doesn't really, like if you notice that you've done something wrong, it's the last submission you make that's marked. So I think it's quite good to make people aware that like there are different types of courseworks that you are like expected to hand in. And that's all from me.
Oh, thanks, Emily. No, it's so good though to have that perspective, you know, just to mention those things, you know, different like ways of being assessed and stuff like that. It's really, really good. And I imagine it's really useful and helpful, hopefully, to people attending to here. So thank you so much. And I'll pass over to Stephen, if that's okay.
Yeah,
I
that's
saw
fine
some
by
really
me.
cool cats going behind you, but none at the moment.
Yeah, that's fine. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. So Stephen, you're also on the foundation year at the moment,
Yes.
aren't you? And you're thinking about progressing on to, is it psychology?
It is. So I'm on the biology pathway. I'm a mature student, and my last educational experience was high school. So I went from high school basically straight into work. So the last educational experience I had was about 15 years ago, 16 years ago, something like that, before I went on to the foundation year. So I did the access course, and there was additional requirements. So I had to do a maths test and also submit an essay, both of which I still have. But all through the Kickstart process, the support and the build up towards actually going on to the course was incredibly helpful for me, because that normalized the experience. So it was a very gradual process of, this is what citation is, this is how you create an essay, these are revision techniques, and these are learning techniques for if you're in a seminar, or if you're in a lecture, or how to take notes. And so it's all the tips and advice like that, that was things that people that have been in education recently or went on to college and that might have either intuited or had to hand, but that someone like me had no concept of. And so that really helped me a lot. Also, I'm the sort of person that I ask a lot of questions, and I like things to be very clear cut. So when Emma was talking about the maps, I always have a campus map. Even though I know the way to almost every one of my lectures, occasionally one will be in a slightly different building and I won't be 100% where it is because I've not been to that room before. So I always keep a campus map on me for that reason. And the staff at the LLC, there's the welcome desk. So I'll sometimes ask them for directions and things like that. And so that level of just assurance on basic things that everyone else can take for granted is worth its weight in gold for someone like me, who is very anxious about things like that. As far as like what I'm progressing on to psychology, hopefully. So they've done like tours around the psychology block, talks with psychology staff, and the requirements for them and any questions. And I've been given emails of members of that department to speak to directly. So again, that makes it more real and tangible for me, because right now it feels very nebulous and not a real thing. I still say that I'm not a student yet because I'm still on a foundation year. I'm not actually an official uni student. That's the level of like uncertainty that I have with me. But I think that the level of communication from the staff has been incredible. There isn't a single one of my lectures that I haven't had a one-to-one with. And so what that is that at the end of a lecture, if I have any questions about what was discussed and I won't have been able to put my hand up and shout it out or anything like that, I'll just go to them at the end of the lecture, and every single one of the lecturers assigns a period of time at the end of a lecture where you can just come talk to them for 5 minutes about it. And if it's a long answer, they'll either email you it or they'll set you up for a one-to-one for it. So as I said, I've not been in education, so I was really confused about chemistry, because all of that was way more advanced than anything I'd even seen when I did high school. So being able to just come up and ask at the end of the lecture, what actually was this? Can you go over this point again? What does this term mean? Was really helpful. I discovered that apparently I am good at maths. So I actually, as one of my optional, I think the modules, I chose physics for that. So I think I'm the only person on the biology pathway that's taking physics. And so those little things like all the terms that are used in physics, little things like measurements, like nanometers and picometers and things like that, that I'd never heard of before. And the lecturer was like, okay, this is what they all mean. And they've created an information sheet basically just for me that covers all these basic terms that the other people who are on the physics pathway have been using for the entire year. And again, I've got their email address to speak to for any individual questions or struggles that I have there. As far as the actual like on-campus support, it's, for me, again, it's the little things, like I can use the computers in the LLC in between lectures. So I was one of those, I used to work full time. I'm used to like chef hours, so like 50, 60 hour work weeks and crazy things like that. So I was on campus at 9, there till 5. And so I would be in the LLC doing my study in there, using the computer, so just using the space with notes. I found some other people that were also progressing onto psychology. So we were all talking together about it and helping each other. I also found some other mature students. And so one of them who's progressing on to, I think, nursing, they are way better at the biology side of things than I could ever be. So they help me with that side of things, and I'll help them with the math side of things, and one of my friends will help us with the chemistry. And so you do form these friendship groups for the more social aspect of things. So if you're struggling, also, I am registered disabled. I have a very bad anxiety disorder, oddly enough. And so the liaison with the disability services has been incredibly supportive. There's mitigating circumstances, which is that if you feel that you maybe didn't get the grade that you should have due to conditions, if you weren't able to submit something on time, or if you were just unable to submit something, they can help around that. And it's very tailored to your condition and how that helps you. And if you don't have the evidence required for it, they will help you both get that evidence and help you with things like finding who to speak to in that specific regard. And there's also a lot of mental health support available. So there's mental health first aiders in the LLC, Paul, who is great. So he's literally just a person that you can just ask to speak to, and he'll do either one-to-one in person with you or by email. And again, so I'm a carer as well. So I have a lot of very nuanced and overlapping issues, but there hasn't been a single issue that I've had that I've not been able to speak to someone about and get tailored support that directly helps me, or at least gives me the tools so I can help myself with it. There's also things like in the libraries. They're very overwhelming to me because they're used a lot by a lot of people, obviously. But when I went into the library, I was like, okay, so which libraries are the quieter libraries? Which times the busier times, and things along those lines. So I got a lovely bit of information about which library is the quieter library, and again, directions to it. And also there's you can book the facilities in the library, so you can have an area that can just be just for you for the amount of time that you've booked it for. And there's also group areas that you can book, so you can go into a library with your the friends that you have made and do study there together again, so you can have that assigned space without other people coming in and going and without being distracted by them. And that's helped me a lot as well. I'm trying to think what else I was going to say. As well as that, again, I mentioned that I'm a carer. So there has been a lot of issues, and you can see I've just moved. There's been a lot of issues where I've had life responsibilities and personal issues that have directly impacted my ability to either attend lectures or to complete assessments. And for every single one of those, I've either spoken to my personal tutor, who has been wonderful, and either had direct support from them, like, don't worry about it, this is fine, these people know about it. So when you supply for those like mitigating circumstances or whatever, you'll get that direct support, and that feedback has been noted. This is all, that assurance is there that when life happens, there is an understanding for it. As well as that, for when I've missed lectures, there is, for every lecture, so far, there has been a video of the lecture, which is a recording of the lecture, so the person speaking and going through all the slides and the information they convey that isn't just on the slides. Then there's also the slides themselves that you can go through, and then there's the handouts that they give out that has the separate information. So almost all the information from being in the lecture you can usually obtain outside of that lecture, which is, again, great for if you can't attend the lecture, but also for that revision purposes and for studying purposes. They've been an absolute godsend for me. Also Labster, because I'd never, in high school, the most I'd done was use a Bunsen burner. And even that was, that didn't end well. So Labster meant that I could have a simulation of what it is like in a lab, what pipettes do, because we have measured pipettes, which makes complete sense, but I'd never thought of before. And all the lab equipment that I'd only ever seen in CSI, I could get a tangible thing for. And now that, due to COVID, we went in labs that much earlier, but now we're in labs. And so I was actually able to use this equipment that I'd only ever seen in CSI or in these sci-fi shows or only ever heard of. And so that gave me this whole world-opening experience that I'd never had before. And so I was saying that I've said to many people now that even if I did fail the foundation year, even if I couldn't progress onto psychology, even if I couldn't resit the year, the experience has been overwhelmingly positive for me and has rekindled this love for all of these things and for all of just learning in general that I didn't know I still had. And every single lecturer is enthusiastic and does care about the subject. And if they don't know about that one particular thing, they will know someone who does. And that is both daunting and incredible at the same time. Yeah, that's it from me, I think.
Oh, thank you so much, Stephen. That was really comprehensive and brilliant. Covered so many different things, but you're definitely, definitely, absolutely brilliant. And just mentioning about the support that you get, I think was brilliant. Both of you, both Emily and Stephen mentioned that, but also when you were talking about the community, people you meet within the Lifelong Learning Centre, I think you do get that a lot, camaraderie of learners within the Lifelong Learning Centre who might be progressing onto a multitude of different programs, but are there to support each other during their foundation year and probably beyond as well. But as you said as well, we understand in the Lifelong Learning Centre that for adults looking at studying the foundation years, you may have been out of education for quite a while. This might be your first experience of education since school, for example, and it is a very, very different experience. And there's a lot of support available, from Katie before you even start, sometimes with our Kickstart, which is getting you ready for your studies, around all those things that Stephen and Emily mentioned, whether it's the more scientific things that related to your course or the study skills, putting together an essay, how do you put together an annotated bibliography, things like that, which you'll learn on the foundation year and with all the access to the support that the Lifelong Learning Centre offers. So yeah, I thought you both summed it up absolutely brilliantly. Thank you both so much. That was absolutely brilliant. It was really, really great, I think, to hear your perspective. So I'm aware that we're running over by about 15 minutes, so I'll try not to go on for too long. But Katie, are you okay just to move over the slide? But yeah, big round of applause from me anyway. Thank you both, you know, Stephen and Emily. That was brilliant. Thank you so much. So just to mention as well, you know, if you you know, are wanting to find out a bit more information, please do feel free to contact us. But you know, you are also eligible, you know, if you're an adult and don't have a recognised degree in the UK, you're very welcome to access our guidance service as well. So with Mohammed and Denise, who hopefully you can see on the screen, and they can, you know, sit down with you either virtually or in the office and kind of talk about your, you know, what you want to study. It's free, it's impartial as well, so irrespective of where and what you want to study as well. And they can go through, you know, your options, what qualifications maybe you have, you know, what you could go on to study. And they're real experts, you know, in kind of looking at queries and inquiries that mature learners may have. So, you know, Stephen said, how does this fit with my life, you know, as a carer, for example, or if you have children, you know, are there any additional financial support you can get while you're studying? You know, these are all questions that they get really regularly, and they're really happy to support you in any way. So if you think this is suitable for you, you know, feel free to contact us. And we do have events that are coming up after this as well. So we, on the 29th of March, we have a event called Studying as a Mature Student, which is actually led by Paul, who Stephen was talking about a bit earlier. And it's just really looking at what it's like to go to university as an adult, and maybe kind of dispelling some myths that people have around adults at university. I'll give you a spoiler. I think there's about 2,500 mature learners, so people 21 and above, who are at the University of Leeds at the moment. So it's certainly not a small number. And also on Tuesday, the 6th of April, we have a student finance session as well. So if you want any further information about finance, myself and Paul will be going through lots of information about that. So we'll send you some information about that as well. And Greg's put a very handy link into the chat. But, you know, feel free to contact us after this if you have any questions at all, if you want to find out more. You know, we're really here to help. And unless there's anything, Katie, Stephen or Emily, you want to add, or if we have any further questions, I think that's probably it from us.
I'll mention one last point. I've just put it in the chat, but I'm autistic, and I found like meeting new people really, really difficult, especially because I moved from just north of Newcastle all the way down to Leeds. And it was like, I found speaking to people very, very difficult. So it's not just the academics that the LLC can help you with, like even just sitting in the room they have provided. Like I've met so many people like Stephen just through like talking to people who have like similar interests, or like it can even spark from someone just being like, can I come sit at your table? Like there's not this social pressure to go out and find people to talk to, and like it's more of a natural process of like meeting new people rather than like being like, oh, I'm at uni, I'm on my own, I don't know who to talk to. It's like very easy to sort of communicate with these people. So if you have trouble like me communicating with other people, you don't need to worry about that like social aspect straight from the get-go, because it'll happen like progressively over time. So if you think you get to your first day and you're like, I haven't met anyone, I don't know anyone, it's fine. You can take a breather and just be like, I'll meet people on my course along the way. So that's my last point.
Oh, what a lovely point to end on as well. Thank you, Emily. That's, yeah, brilliant. I think you're exactly right. You know, there's so many people. It's a very friendly environment, I think, you know, at the Life and Learning Centre. You know, people are always there to chat, and, you know, and it's a great place to meet other learners at the Life and Learning Centre. And it may be that they're studying on the same course as you, but it could be part-time courses or the foundation years, and a number of different ones. But yeah, thanks everybody. Unless there's anything else anybody wants to add. Okay, I think Nathan's got his hand up actually.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? Right. So I'm actually wanting to apply for next.
Yeah, muted yourself there.
Hello.
Oh, we can hear you now.
Right.
I think that was my fault, Nathan. Sorry,
yeah.
I was trying to press mute on myself. Sorry.
I'm actually wanting to apply for next September, because I need to get my maths anyway, so I'm extending my maths to get up to grade 6. But would you recommend applying close to the time or applying as early as possible with a deferred year?
That's a great question. What I would say is I would apply as early as you can in the year that you're thinking of coming to us. So, for example, if you were coming to us kind of to start September 2023, so not this coming September, but the September after is I think what you're saying, I would apply as soon as that kind of new academic year starts. So I'd be looking at kind of the October 22, so kind of 1 year in advance, but not more than 1 year in advance, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd be looking at then, but I'd probably say to do it early, just so that then you get more time with us in some ways of getting to know the information, and we can help you with the application process. So yeah, kind of the October that you're thinking of joining us for the following September.
Yeah. And the other thing was, what are the chances? I know I've heard it's hard, but what are the chances of getting, what's it called, mature student accommodation?
Ooh, accommodation. So accommodation does not work first come, first serve. So accommodation, what happens is when you accept an offer from the University of Leeds, everyone that is eligible for accommodation can request it. And then it's like normally up until the kind of June before you're due to start, you can be applying. So there isn't a kind of rush to do it. And then you kind of request what it is that you want. And then accommodation tries to match you with that. So it's not like it's time sensitive. There's just kind of one point by which you must have applied by. So it's not first come, first serve. So there's no pressure or anything like that. And again, it allows you then to look around different accommodation, because oftentimes the team that do all the accommodation can, they do virtual tours as well as physical ones where you can go visit the different accommodations. So it gives you a chance to visit them, and they normally do those in the spring. So it's definitely not first come, first serve.
Sorry, one more. For the computer science, is there anything else apart from my maths that I should really be preparing for before I apply?
No, I would say maths is great. I just as, because I mean, it'd be nice if you have an idea of kind of what coding is, or it seems like you already do, but just to have kind of be introduced to it. That is one of the things that I would say to know about that before you go on to the degree is always advisable, but not necessarily before the foundation year. So no, I would just say the maths.
I've already written a few programs and worked on databases for quite a while, so.
Oh, well then you'll be grand. You'll be grand.
Right, thank you.
More than welcome.
I've got my hand up because someone asked me a question before, and to be honest, it was like a direct message or whatever, and I don't know how to respond, so I thought I'd open the floor to everyone. They're asking what would happen if they didn't get the grades required in order for them to progress into that. So like if I didn't get the grades to progress into theoretical physics, what would the options be then?
We kind of, apart from healthcare, because healthcare is a different thing, but for most of our kind of general science degrees, what we have is a progression agreement. So every student that joins us know what they need to get in the September that they join us. And it's done like a kind of contract that says, if you get these things, your place is guaranteed. If you don't, which is kind of what the question is asking, what happens then? What happens then is not guaranteed, but we will always try something. So it might be that the progression department will still accept you, but we can't guarantee that. It might be that we look at backup plans. Oftentimes, there's normally a reason for why that's happening. So it could be kind of like as Stephen was saying, it could be about kind of life just happens. So we'd normally be advising you well before that kind of looked likely. So we'd be having those conversations and looking at what your options are. Again, working with people like Mohammed and Denise to see if it is that you're interested in potentially a different degree with a different progression agreement, or if there is another university that you are potentially considering that would accept our foundation year for direct entry to them. So we talk through a lot of options if that happens. And so we will always support our students to get to somewhere that they want to. But we'd work with you while you're on course with us to make sure, hopefully that doesn't happen. But if it does, we've got a plan. I knew that before. Why is healthcare different? Healthcare are different is because sometimes they have additional criteria. The government restricts how many places there are on each degree program. So there's a cap. And so if you don't meet the kind of the pathway, because there is a cap, the place is then offered to someone that can meet it. So healthcare is slightly different. And so that's things like medicine, dentistry, nursing, radiography. But again, if it looks likely that that could happen, again, we would look at a backup plan. So everyone that is on a healthcare, because they are different, you have a backup plan in advance. And we talk through that in the September. So we make sure that there is already a backup plan for something else at Leeds. So it could be, for example, instead of studying medicine, it could be biomedical sciences instead, which then you can do a conversion course to get to medicine later on in your career.
Thanks, Katie. I think we've just got one more question. I think we've ran quite far over, haven't we? So, but we've had Carolina has just asked, and how is it for medicine? So I think just a specific medicine route there.
No, I think, yeah, that she answered.
Oh, right. Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Carolina. Thank you very much. So I thank you so much to everybody for staying around as well, and apologies for running over, but it's been lovely to meet you all, and thanks so much for coming to the session. Hopefully it's been useful, and thanks so much to Katie and Stephen and Emily as well. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. So yeah, thanks everybody.